Okay, it looks like our participant numbers have stabilized a little bit here. I'm sure we'll have some more that'll be joining, but I want to welcome everybody today to our virtual meeting with Senator Doug Jones. My name is Fred McCollum. I'm the interim president and CEO of the Birmingham Business Alliance. But through the magic of the Zoom registration process, I have the distinct honor of showing up to you today as Elizabeth Paul on your screen. At least that's how I'm showing up on our screens here, and I'm sure it may be showing up that way to all of you. And I feel honored by that. I want to thank Senator Jones for being here. I'll introduce him in just a moment. I also wanted to add a special thanks to our investors of the Birmingham Business Alliance who make what we do here possible every day and make it possible for us to do things like this webinar and many other things. If it's okay, I might take just a minute to just update you on some of the activities that we've been involved with in the pandemic over the last several weeks. We have set up a resources page on our website, which is birminghambusinessalliance.com. We do our very best to keep that not only up to date, but up to the minute. There's a lot of things changing in this world. And we try very hard to keep that up to date and up to minute, and also filled with kind of stable information that is reliable. So please feel free to use that. I think that we've kind of turned into one big business support group here, as we have many organizations have across the country. We've been privileged to work and support the Birmingham Strong effort in reaching out to small businesses here in the city of Birmingham. We're reaching out in particular to our small and mid-tier investors in the BBA. We're fortunate to be able to provide workforce data and information to Central 6 and other workforce partners around the region. We've been started our webinars now. We are, I think, at least we were in the process of kind of transitioning from information on the loan programs to information on business continuity. Now that I've got my loan, how can I make sure it will be forgiven? And also working on back to work rules and back to work best practices and providing those to businesses around the region. So we've also done a business impact survey over the last 2.5 weeks. One of the more interesting aspects of that, Senator, was that about 40% of the small businesses that responded to that said that they had about 30 days cash or less on hand. So we're at about that, at that 30-day period. And I think all of us are feeling the impacts of that from our small businesses. They are obviously beginning to get assistance from the federal programs and from the state programs, which we're all hopeful will help that situation out greatly, not only now, but into the future. Couple of logistics. If you have questions for the senator following his briefing, if you'll just use the chat function on the Zoom meeting to submit your question. We are recording this meeting, and it will be available on BBA's website after it's over with. I'd like to briefly introduce Senator Doug Jones. I know many of you know Doug very well. You know he's a native of Fairfield, Alabama, went to the University of Alabama and then the Cumberland School of Law. He served as the United States Northern District Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama from 1987 to 2001, during which time he prosecuted 2 of the 4 persons responsible for the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in 1963. He was elected to the Senate in December of 2017, where he serves on the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the Committee on Armed Services, and finally, the Senate Committee on Aging. I want to particularly thank members of Senator Jones's staff who have helped us, as well as a member of our staff. That's Brian Bowden, Jose Perry, Brenda Strickland, Elizabeth Paul of our staff, and Brantley Fry of Senator Jones's staff. Doug, we really appreciate you being here with us and sharing with us. I know it's a really busy time for you in the Senate right now. I'm reading the newspapers and watching the news, so I can. So thank you very much for being here with us, and welcome.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Fred. Thanks for everybody joining, and let me share a little bit today and maybe get into some questions and answers. I'll tell you that I thought that my schedule in Washington, D.C. was extraordinarily busy, but I have really not seen a schedule like we've had over the last 3 weeks since I got back home after we passed what is known as COVID-3, the third package that we did. We started working in Washington remotely about a week or so before that. The staff started staying home. When I was up there that last week, we had a skeletal staff in the office with me. Most of that package that you saw, that $2 trillion package, was done primarily remotely before we finally got a chance to vote on it on a Thursday night and head home. Staff's done an amazing job, but we've been really busy. And the minute we passed that last piece of legislation, I think everybody knew that there were going to have to be some fixes, number one, and number two, that we're likely to have to do some more money, which is what I'm hoping that will happen either today, but more than likely tomorrow. So let me go back a little bit and rewind what we did early on. First package was about an $8.3 billion package. It was focused on getting money to start developing vaccines, treatments, and getting into our healthcare professionals. The second package that originated in the House of Representatives did a lot for nutrition, for seniors, for children, paid family leave during this crisis, and a few other odds and ends that we had. It was still a pretty big package. But the big one that the Senate worked on, the $2 trillion package, was really, if you think about this, a pretty remarkable effort over about a 2-week period for a very partisan world to come together and pass a $2 trillion package, which, if you think about it, was the largest package, financial package in the history of this country. Even our appropriations last year, or actually for this year, our discretionary appropriations package was $1.3 trillion. And Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy worked on that a year to get that out. We did this in about 2 weeks. It is not a perfect bill, as you have all seen or heard about, from the various things that might be in there that you might not like, I might not like, to the problems we've had with a rollout with the Payroll Protection Plan through the SBA. But the enemy, perfect was not the enemy of the good, and we needed to get this package out. One thing that I keep telling folks, that legislation has been referred to as a stimulus package, and I don't really have never seen it that way. I don't think we were stimulating the economy as much as we were trying to save the economy. It was in a complete and total free fall. The health crisis was getting deeper than I think folks it originally thought about how it would affect businesses. As more and more states started closing down, it sunk in that we were going to be in for the long haul economically. So that $2 trillion package did a lot of things, put $133 billion in hospitals and healthcare for testing and dealing with the crisis, put $150 billion in for city and state governments to try to help them with the extraordinary expenses. It didn't go as far as helping state and local governments backfill with some of the ordinary expenses that they're having to incur, even though they've got lost revenue. There was a $500 billion fund there for larger companies. There was the $350 billion for the Payroll Protection Plan. There was money in there for an emergency relief for small businesses. There was unemployment compensation that increases to 39 weeks, plus gives an extra $600 per week for that. And I know I'm forgetting something. There were a lot of things. There was a lot of things that we tried to do to try to stop the free fall of the economy. Now, where we are now is basically that we've seen the problems with the SBA and the Payroll Protection Plan. One of the things that we're trying to do is tweak that program to try to make it more efficient, and also to get money down to Main Street where it is. There's a lot of things that the Fed is doing. They've got their own loan program for small to medium-sized companies that will help with low interest or no interest loans over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. But bill that I think will come out tomorrow is going to add $350 billion to the SBA and the small business, the payroll protection plan. That's at least the figure that I'm hearing today. I've been on the phone a fair amount this morning with the staff and others. It's going to add another $100 billion to help our hospitals and healthcare professionals because they're hemorrhaging money left and right. Even hospitals that have not seen a surge in COVID patients have all elected to do the right thing and to cut out elective procedures, routine procedures, and that has cost them a ton of money. So we're trying to backfill some of that. They've got a $25 billion plan in there for testing, because I think the one thing that has to happen in the future is that we have got to ramp up the testing, and this PPE supply chain has really been a nightmare to work on. Protective equipment is continuing to be a problem for people across this country. So that's the package I think is going to come out today or tomorrow, one of the two. They're putting the final touches on that today. The one thing that is not included in there, and which I'm really disappointed in, and I've been advocating, is that it is additional monies for state and local governments, particularly local governments. Our cities like Birmingham have been, really losing money because of the shutdown orders and the stay-at-home orders that were put in place. They're not going to have the revenue, but yet they have the essential services. For some reason, folks on the other side of the aisle didn't really want to do that in this package. I'm hoping it will get in a fourth package that people are beginning to talk about, but I don't know. I'm really been pushing for that. The other thing that I'm hoping that we're going to work on is Medicaid expansion, because I think this state we have seen in this pandemic, we have shown a spotlight on the racial and health disparities in Alabama, as well as the rest of the country. And I'm hoping that we can work. I've been talking to colleagues. I've got a bill pending with Senator Warner called the SAME Act, which would give states the incentives to expand Medicaid, giving them 100% reimbursement for 3 years. I'm hoping that a variation of that might come into play for the next package, because the fact of the matter is our healthcare professionals and our healthcare is going to be overloaded for some time. We may not see the need for thousands of ventilators, but as the pent-up demand comes to fruition after we start opening this economy back up, our healthcare, our hospitals, which are still losing money and going to continue to lose money, will need to see some, not just backfill for lost profits, but they're going to need to be able to treat those that are uninsured. In Alabama, we have about 300, I've heard different numbers, 326,000 up to 377,000 people in Alabama that would benefit from Medicaid. Plus, we're going to see a number of people that are remaining unemployed. The unemployment is not going to drop to the 2.7% it was back in January and February, not anytime soon. I'm hoping that we'll do something to give the states the incentives to expand Medicaid, incentives like to states like Alabama. There's about 14 states, mostly in the Deep South, that did not expand Medicaid. That's a lot of money. That's close to 900 to million to $1 billion that could come into Alabama just through the expansion of Medicaid. If we can do it with 100% reimbursement, I understand financially right now it would be a little hard pressed, although personally, I think the investment, the state ought to make that investment. That's just my view.
Really a plan, you said.
So, yeah, this is a plan that we announced on Friday. This plan would essentially recognize, number one, that as we start to talk about opening up the economy, we've got to do it in a smart and healthy way. This is not going to be flipping a switch on a holiday tree. This is going to be something we're going to have to roll out, and it needs to be based on science so that we don't need see another surge in this virus. That means that not everybody is going to get back to work by the 1st of May or even the 1st of June, and maybe not even the 1st of July. We'll see. So this plan that we have will give a cushion for both businesses and the employees, and recognizing that they may have to stay off of work for some time. Basically, it will be a grant program, not a loan program, administered through the Treasury that will fund payroll up to $90,000 for an individual. This plan will be open to any business, hopefully to farmers, hopefully to anybody that has a payroll at all, that they can apply and make that payroll. We'll have to show 20% loss of revenue, and there'll be some guardrails on it as people can do to wean out. But it's really, I think, the best plan and the most efficient plan to get money to businesses and their employees quicker, to make sure that they stay on the payroll as opposed to moving over to the unemployment line and overwhelming the unemployment compensation offices the way we've done it lately. And I think it will free up the banks from getting a lot of information, from getting overloaded through the payroll protection plan. That's one thing that I'm going to be looking at. We're going to be pushing. There's a lot of folks that I've been very pleased with the response that we're getting from the small business community and others around the country for this plan when we just rolled it out Friday. Again, it would be administered directly through the Treasury. And frankly, guys, this is something, the concept was based on something that I was proposing early on, which is using payroll processing companies to administer the payroll protection plan. Forget about the fact that it was a loan and having to go through banks. Everyone knew that ultimately, if people were honest about it, and if they're not honest about it, there was other ways to deal with them. But if they're honest about it, these loans in the payroll protection plan were going to turn into grants. Let's just acknowledge that on the front end, get folks that their money, to give people the cushion necessary to help the businesses get back open, but do it in a methodical way that follows the science and the health data, as well as protecting the employees. It's a big plan. Fred, if you haven't seen our release and the white paper, we're happy to get that so that you can send that out to your members. There's nothing sacred about it either. It is a work in progress. It is not something that we are set in stone on. So feedback is always welcome on that. So I will say, though, that there is no guarantee that there will be a fourth COVID package. I believe it's necessary to do that. I really believe that we're going to have to do that because the depth of this crisis is greater than so many people thought, but we'll see how that goes. We're anticipating going back on May the 4th. I think that will hold. It could be that we delay that somewhat depending on what's going on in the DC area. But with that, Fred, that's about all I got for the update. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that folks have. And if I can't answer them, I got staff on the line taking notes, and we'll get right back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. And I will tell you that Brantley was nice enough to send me your white paper on Saturday. It was distributed to everybody who's registered for this event yesterday afternoon. So most people on this call should have that plan. I'm gonna call on Elizabeth Paul, if she is still on the line, the real Elizabeth Paul, who's been taking your questions and taking your questions actually before we got here today. Elizabeth, you there?
Yes, Fred, I'm here. Thank you. And thank you, Senator. We appreciate your update and your work. Hi, everyone. This is Elizabeth Paul. I serve as the Manager of Public Policy for the Birmingham Business Alliance. As a reminder, please use the chat function to send in your questions, and I can relay those to the Senator, and we'll try to fit in as many questions as we can. Okay, so we'll start out with a question about the Payroll Protection Program. Is it anticipated that the PPP might be extended to cover a longer period, even for those who have already been approved?
Yes, I don't think you're going to see that in this particular package that we're getting out tomorrow. We're trying to do a few other fixes, and I think that language is still being worked out. It could be, but there has been a lot of discussions, and frankly, from my discussions with colleagues, it seems like everybody recognizes that the plan, the June 30th deadline has to be extended. The 8 weeks in which you have to expend the money is going to have to be extended. I think there's going to be still some more tweaks that come out of this over the next couple of 3 weeks as we go forward. There's a lot of things, and I'm happy to hear from folks at some point. Just call our office with suggestions on that. But I do think that that's going to be in the works. I'm just not sure they'll be able to get it in this particular package because I think that there is an urgent need to try to get this done in the next day or so, because the plan ran out of money last Thursday.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up to that, can the program be expanded to include mid-sized businesses that are over 500 people?
Well, I think that what I'm hoping to do is to use the plan that I'm talking about, the payroll, the Paycheck Security Act, to do that. The plan that we've got will bypass the bank so that they can be freed up to do other things and go and have this administered straight out of the Treasury as a grant. And it would be for any business. It doesn't matter how small or how large, they could apply through this fund, whatever it ends up being. We have no number on it just yet, but they could apply. And that's how I'm hoping to do the next round. And the next package, if we see one, I'm hoping we can kind of carve that out to give people another opportunity to use a different mechanism other than going through a loan process with the SBA that has to go through a bank. I think it'll be faster, it'll be efficient, it'll be open to any business, and you don't have to play the games. I mean, look, there are a lot of games that got played on this thing. We're seeing now some of the huge restaurant chains, that got a lot of this money that should have been for Main Street businesses that didn't get it. In fact, I think Shake Shack or somebody's giving back $10 million back into the program. So that's where I'm hoping to do. We'll see where it goes, but I'm hoping we can get some traction on this one to create a separate program. And it will be a separate program that will be in addition to that. People can utilize it or not. They can still go through the SBA. This will just be another weapon that we've got to kind of deal with this crisis from an economic standpoint.
Thank you. Last question on the PPP. Will 501c6 nonprofit organizations be considered for future phases of the CARES Act and the PPP or other programs moving forward?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I will tell you that you guys think of the 501c6s in the context of the chambers of commerce and organizations like yourself. But there is also other 501c6s like Planned Parenthood. And when you get into those dynamics of trying to pick winners and losers within a C6, that makes politically very, very difficult. And that's why I think you have seen that they weren't included the first go around, because you're not going to be able to get through allowing the Chamber of Commerce to do it if you don't allow Planned Parenthood to do it. And there's others similar. So that is probably one of the more politically sensitive issues that I think has been dealt with. From my standpoint, I will tell you, I've advocated putting that money and making them eligible, and just let the politics be damned a little bit about it, because I think it's important for you guys, but I also think it's important for other C6s who are also in similar positions of losing that revenue and losing the income and losing employees.
Senator, this is Fred. Backing up a little bit, C3s were included in the original PPP plan. Do you see those
Yes.
C3s continuing to be included in the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think C3s, religious organizations, the one thing that wasn't included that we're trying to get some language that should be included were farmers and their folks. They've been really hurting really bad because the SBA guidance pushed them out of it. But yes, I do think C3s will still be, I think it's going to be the same group. I'm hoping we can get some language to include farmers, but I think at least for the package that'll pass today or tomorrow, I think it'll be basically the same group.
Thank you. Okay, changing gears a bit, a two-part question. How vulnerable are we strategically to the China supply chain, and what have we learned during this time about the global supply chain?
Well, I think we've been, everybody has recognized that we are especially vulnerable to China with regard to our healthcare and not only personal protective equipment, but also in routine drugs. And what I'm hoping that as we start moving out of this, what I would like to see is incentives so that manufacturing facilities in the United States, not that they come back, because I'm not sure these facilities left, but even if they did, it's hard to bring somebody back. But I would like to see, based on our healthcare alone, just our healthcare alone, be able to do something to create incentives for American companies to locate, including right here in Alabama. Who would have dreamed 25 years ago we'd been such a big automobile manufacturer? We've got idle places right now that I think we could see and use and have manufacturers come in and building, making masks, making gowns. The fact is, ventilators, other equipment, we've got a lot of facilities. So I do think that there will be a lot to talk about with regard to our healthcare, so that the next time this happens, and it will at some point in the future, we know that it may not, God knows it may not be for another 100 years, and hopefully it would be never. But the fact is, the odds are we'll see something like this again. We won't be as dependent on having to scrounge around the rest of the globe, and particularly in China, and trying to get that. So from that standpoint, though, after the healthcare, it gets a little bit more difficult because we do have such a global economy, and Alabama has become such a trade-reliant state. We are an exporting state, and when you send things to China, you're expected to buy things from China and other places in the country. So I think trade has obviously been on the agenda for the administration. It's been on mine for the last couple of years since I've been in the Senate, to try to do it in the right way. This is going to, I think we're going to have to reshift a little bit and see what we look at. But I really think we've been more dependent on China for personal protective equipment, our drug, the things that ingredients that go into drugs, and our supply chain there, reagents and all for testing. And this has been coming some from Europe. We got to have to rethink the whole healthcare supply chain, I think, immediately, so that we can refurbish our national stockpile, that the Defense Department has all that they need, that states have all that they need on an ongoing basis. And when we do that, this is not just a one-time deal for this, to refurbish the national stockpile. We got to make sure that when we do that and we put masks and we put gowns back in there, that we routinely move them out, because we've got masks in Alabama that had an expiration date on it in 2010. So we don't need to just put these things in a warehouse and forget about them. We've got to have a plan to where we can get those out before they expire to where they're needed, and then replenish that national stockpile. So I do think that's the main area of China immediate need coming out of this crisis.
If anyone has additional questions, Elizabeth Paul is about to put on the chat. Hold on. Put on the chat her email address. Ryan, if you can, so if people can still see the chat, I guess they can. Okay. So, or you can go to our website, which is here, and go to the Ask a Question button on our resource page, and you can ask the question there. So if you, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but I do think we got a lot of good information. I really appreciate Senator Jones taking the time to be with us and fill us in on what's going on. And we look forward to talking to you again in the near future. Have a great day. Thank you.